Hello, YouTube divers. This is WaterDive122, and I want to welcome you back to yet another episode of Magic Metal Mondays. Today, we are going to be talking about Megadeth. Now, Megadeth is one of my top 10 favorite bands of all time, and they're my second favorite band from the Big Four. And I know I haven't really talked about Megadeth that much recently, other than whenever their Rust in Peace album makes my favorite lists or something like that. Um, but this time I'm going to talk about all 15 of their albums, worst to best. So this will be another two-part episode where I go from 15 to 8 here on this part, and then number 7 and number 1 on the next part of this list. So let's get started. Coming in at number 15, no surprise here, 2013's Super Collider. Now, this might be a surprise to some Megadeth fans, or maybe not, because, a lot of people would put Risk here at number 15, but for me, it's Super Collider that takes the worst spot, mainly because it is just not Megadeth. I mean, this album is fine, but there's not really a lot of great songs outside of Kingmaker, Burn, and the beginning of Sorrow. I mean, all those songs are freaking amazing. The title track is kind of a letdown. The music video is just so cringy. Oh my god. But the music and the songwriting is not bad on this album. It's just not really Megadeth-like. And so for that reason, I gotta put it here at number 15. Number 14, the 2001 album, The World Needs a Hero. This album is probably a step down from their previous album, Risk, and I know that's saying a lot. But this album just doesn't really feel as a complete package than some of their other albums have. This album, the title track is really good, don't get me wrong. I love the title track of this album. There are, and like with Super Collider, it does have its moments, but compared to everything else that Megadeth has done over the years, you know how much better they've gotten. So, with that said, The World Needs a Hero comes here at number 14. And number 13 is the album 13 from 2011. Now, this album, Quest for Metal, he really likes this album, especially better than Risk. But for me, it's kind of the opposite way around, because this album is just there as a Megadeth album. Now, outside of Public, beside the great song on here that is Public Enemy number 1, and a couple of other little moments on here, this album is just not really my cup of tea. I don't really like the production on this album that much. I don't really like Dave Mustaine's vocals on here. This album is just alright. It's alright. It's a mediocre album. It's just kind of up and down, and it's just kind of whatever for me. So, the album 13 takes the number 13 spot. Number 12, the 1999 album, Risk. Now it's like what I've been talking about with Load by Metallica on my 1990s albums of the year part. I tend to really enjoy mainstream metal albums because they are just so catchy and they are so memorable. But this album is sort of the exception outside of the song Prince Charming. This album just kind of meanders, and it kind of just is way too cheesy for Megadeth. And plus, this did not have the classic lineup, in my opinion, of Marty Freeman and Nick Menza on the drums and guitar, respectively. This was the first album to not feature them on a Megadeth album. So, for that reason, and because a lot of the songs on here aren't really that good, it falters here at number 12. So, Risk coming in at number 12. And number 11 is the 2004 album, The System Has Failed. Now, if you want a politically motivated album, then this is your album. This is just so political. And ironically, this was meant to be a Dave Mustaine solo album. But no, it's labeled as a Megadeth album. And I think it does a good job. I mean, heck, Blackmail the Universe opens up this album, and it freaking smokes. But this album, in of its own self, outside of Blackmail the Universe, and like I said, a couple of other small moments on here, this album is just kind of meh for me. I mean, it's not a terrible album, but I really think it should have stayed as a Dave Mustaine solo album, but who knows. So with that said, System Has Failed coming in at number 11. Number 10, the 2007 album, United Abominations. Oh man, speaking of politically motivated albums, this album is freaking amazing. Basically everything from this album onwards is freaking amazing in my opinion. I love this album. Washington is Next is one of Megadeth's best songs, and I even enjoy the re-recording of A Tout Le Monde. I think it's really good. The featured act on here, I don't remember what her name is, but she does an amazing job singing along with Dave Mustaine. And I kind of like the more upbeat tone of the re-recording. I still love the original version of A Tout Le Monde, but I'll get to that when we talk about the album that I originally came out on. But anyways, this album in general, very politically motivated, but it works. Whereas with The System Has Failed, it doesn't really work all the time. But United Abominations is a politically motivated album that works for me, and that's why I put it higher than The System Has Failed. And because of the Megadeth elements, it comes here at number 10. So, number 10, United Abominations. Number 9, the 2009 album, Endgame. This was the album that followed United Abominations, and I'd say it was a slight improvement with the classic song Head Crusher. I love that song. There are also some really great tracks on here. Aside from Head Crusher, and those tracks just make me want to rock along with them. This album was a great album, and this was the album that Megadeth put out before going on that big four adventure with Metallica, Anthrax, and Slayer. It was freaking amazing. But getting back to my point here, this album is really, really strong, and what a way to close off the 2000s discography labels for Megadeth, because this was their final 2000s album. Endgame is a really underrated album, and I highly recommend you check it out. Number 8, the 1997 album, Cryptic Writings. Oh boy, now I know a lot, and I know a plethora of Megadeth fans would put this album way lower on the list. But this album to me is just amazing. I mean, first off, you got the song Trust, and you got the song She-Wolf, two of Megadeth's best songs. And this, unfortunately, was the final album to feature Marty Friedman and Nick Menza. But what a way to go out. Now, this is definitely my least favorite album from the Marty Friedman, Nick Menza era of Megadeth. But this album is just very radio friendly, and that's mainly why I enjoy it so much, because as I said with Risk, I love radio friendly metal albums. If they work, and to me, this album works. It has that groove that I'm looking for, and for that, I just can't help but admire it. Cryptic Writings is another underrated album. I highly recommend you check it out. So with that said, Cryptic Writings, here at number 8. And so that will conclude part 1 of my Megadeth album rankings. Thank you so much for watching, my fellow YouTube divers. This is Water I 122 signing out, ready to dive into more fun on YouTube. Thanks for watching.